Yeah, I don't know.
Hello, Jeanette.
Hello there, how are you?
So this, are you on page 7704?
Let's see. Yes.
On the third column, sort of the penultimate paragraph.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what you said there.
No, I think you saw that. Say no.
Talks about community acceptance, and that's not what we're really talking about. We'll talk about it publicly. It's time to get going here. 30 seconds. Good evening and welcome to the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission meeting for March 25th, 2014. Reminder that this meeting is being recorded. Are there any comments on the agenda?
No.
Hearing none, consider it approved. The next item is the working group minutes of February 25th, the master plan working group where we had a posted airport commission meeting at the same time. But because Mr. Gasparo and I were the only people there, we didn't have a quorum, and therefore we basically didn't have a meeting. So there will be something that we put together that's in the, did they get a copy of that? That's, that will go in the minute book as a recording of the fact that the meeting didn't happen, but I don't think it needs any formal approval at this point. I would ask, are there any comments or on the minutes of the meeting of March 11th?
No. No.
Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
I'll move approval.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. May I have a motion to ratify the warrant of March 19th, 2014, please?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Is there public comment at this time? All right, the first item is the Nantucket Music Festival parking request. Mr. Rafter?
We have a request from the Nantucket Music Festival to rent our lot that we have on New South Road or Bunker Road right across from the VFW for the 2 days of the festival. And I don't think we have any issues with that. We would be required to charge them fair market value, so whatever it breaks down to per day. It's 88 cents, I think, per square foot. I think we estimated it might be about $600 or something.
For the 2 days?
Yes. But again, we're required to do that, so we would just have to look at it. I would have one question, though, whether the shuttle bus, if it's going to be picking up at just the entrance to the lot, or if it's going to be entering the lot, because that'll have a significant impact on how many cars they can put in there, I think, so.
Ms. Emery is here from the Music Festival and hopefully can address that question.
Hello.
Would you identify yourself, please?
I'm Cheryl Emery from Nantucket Music Festival. I think the best would have the bus to pull into the lot and drive through and come back out.
Do you know what size buses?
They're 40 feet.
Okay.
They're school buses.
Yeah, just that's going to have we're going to actually also probably require then somebody be in there, at least lay out and park the cars appropriately.
Right. We will have that. And we will, Local Motion is the company that's coming here from Boston to that we're leasing the buses from them, and they will name you and us as additional insured.
Okay. I have no objection at all.
Is there a, one-time fee along with are we going to waive that?
Oh, the business fee, you mean?
Business fee, yeah. I mean, all our tenants pay that technically, do they not?
They do. I have to look to find out if we have to. We may have to because it is a non-aeronautical use. I don't know the answer to it.
Ms. Emery, just so you understand, this is going to come up in a conversation later on in this meeting about something else. There's something called the FAA rules about revenues and expenses and all that kind of thing, and what we can and can't do. And one of the things that we can't do is make a donation of this service to a organization such as yours. It's just not allowed. So it's
Okay.
not a question of our being nasty, it's a question of our doing what we have to do. And so the rent is one thing, but it just occurred to me, didn't talk about this morning, Mr. Rafter and I, but whether, hopefully we can waive the $1,500 business fee. But we're going to have to look into that. And
Okay.
I think,
Actually, the FAA handles the use of airport property differently than donating money. So there are different kind of rules for community use.
but I'm saying we can't, when I was saying we couldn't use it for nothing, we couldn't give it to them for nothing anyway, under
But-
the rules, right?
And Dan, I'm thinking it'd be just like a special event, just like we have with the hangar. We just charge the fee associated with that, not necessarily the business fee, so.
That's fine with me, I just wanted to make
it
sure
should be
we're
I-
touching all the
I
bases.
think we are, but I'll double check that.
All right. Why then don't I, do you have any questions?
I
comments?
did. I mean, didn't have a chance to get out and look at the exact property, but does it need to be cleared, or is it grass, or what is
It's
it?
fenced in, it's gravel. We have some equipment stored there. We use it primarily when we have a large construction job as a construction staging area. But there's nothing there right now, so.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have a map of the area, like in your files somewhere?
We have.
Oh, we have it in
Actual-
files. I
Like
don't know.
a survey of the size?
Yes.
Okay, that would be great.
Have this yet?
No, thanks, thank you. Okay, great.
But again, there's some of that property too where we have some storage, so we would have to just cut that down a little bit.
Okay,
We can measure the actual size.
okay, so will you write us a letter, or?
We will get back to you with exactly what the requirements be and everything else.
All
As long
right.
as the commission approves it, sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. What's the pleasure of the commission?
I move approval pending the research of the cost or the charge, if there's anything that needs to be added extra or not.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. Thank you. Good luck. Pending leases and contracts.
We have a number of items today. G.J. Smith had asked to be put on. I believe they want to address the commission. As you know, we haven't moved forward with that. We are waiting to hear more information from Weston, the consultant who was out last week to do some sampling of the soil on the pile that was removed from the site.
Good evening, Commissioners. Greetings from Utah, where it's 60 degrees, no humidity, and
Don't rub it in.
very pleasant. But we could use the water that you're going to get tonight. I have presented to each of you a written version of what I would like to review with you for a moment as it relates to the discovery of an ordinance and the holding pattern that we seem to be in on the lease. has been awarded to G.J. Smith. If I may, I'll just regurgitate this here for a few moments, and then, as there are questions, we could have just an update discussion, if you would, and help us know where to begin as of this point.
Excuse me, sir, I don't recall you said your name, first of all.
I'm sorry. My name is Rod Allred, and I represent G.J. Smith.
I don't think it would be particularly helpful at this point for us to go through a review of what happened and didn't happen over the last period of time. I understand your concerns, and I understand that also that this may at some point become a bone of contention between Mr. Smith and us. But I think the immediate question is what can be done going forward.
I concur with that.
And so, I mean, this is here, it's part of the record now. Again, I believe it, rehashing it would not serve any useful purpose at this time.
I understand that,
So
and I'm comfortable with that. I'm with you. I would like to know what opportunities exist now for us to help this commission and Mr. Rafter in his position as the airport manager to expedite any remedy to the difficulties that we face.
Before we get into the specifics, I just think it is fair to sort of set out a context that we unfortunately find ourselves between a bit of a rock and a hard place here. Because, as you know, the discovery of the ordinance ultimately led to the discovery by the commission and the staff that this FUD site encompassed the area that we're talking about. And there are commitments there is a commitment in essence by the Army Corps of Engineers to get this site cleaned up by a date that's not acceptable to anybody, namely 2035. Hopefully this process will, the discovery will accelerate the process dramatically. But one of the things that we cannot do is put ourselves at risk of losing the potential, losing the funds for the cleanup from the Army Corps of Engineers.
Understood.
And so, in that context, let's go forward with the discussion.
I could give you an update as to where we are, if you don't mind.
Please.
Last week, our consultant, Weston, was out, performed some sampling on the pile of dirt that was removed from the site and placed on the airport.
But it was not, excuse me, it was not removed from the site that Mr. Smith and Mr. Allred are talking about. It was removed from one of the other sites, was it?
Correct.
Yeah.
From the FUD site, which has not yet been, the boundaries have not been defined specifically by the Army Corps. The intent is that we would take the sampling, get the results, and then make a determination with legal and others as to how we proceed with what is on the leased properties, the current leased properties. Those results should be back within the next 7 to 10 days. They did not find any munitions during the sampling, but they're going to now look to see what, if any, I believe metals are maybe in the soil, and if in fact there is a reportable event to the DEP. So once we get those results, we'll make a determination how to proceed with the current leased areas where the dirt came from, and then an overall determination for the site that may impact G.J. Smith.
If I may, Mr. Rafter, is there a question as to whether Mr. Smith's parcel would not be part of this study area? Is that still a question?
It is a question. We have asked the DEP to define specifically the boundaries of this site, and we have not received anything back yet.
And will that come from the Army Corps of Engineers, or will that be defined by your independent consulting group?
That would be through the Army Corps.
And any idea, an estimated time of receiving that portion of the
I don't know that we can
information?
even expect to receive it. They were hesitant to even pinpoint the exact coordinates and boundaries. The only coordinates they gave us are where their samples were taken when they determined it to be a FUD site.
Understood. Is there anything that we can do as a participant here, as a potential?
I don't know of anything else we can do. We've talked to DEP about trying to get the remediation moved up to 2014-15 timeframe. I think what's going to happen is once we get the results back, as I say, we're going to have to get together and determine what our risk and liability may be, and then decide how we proceed with the existing leases as well as yours potentially.
So is it my understanding that we got two facets here that we're dealing with, Army Corps of Engineers on ordnance and Weston, a private environmental firm who is doing a subsequent metal testing to see if we have a problem in that area?
Well, there's munitions and there's also soils, and Weston is working for us independently, doing tests to see if the metals are there. That's kind of moving the process further down the road rather than waiting for Army Corps to come out. The Army Corps and DEP are both involved. There may possibly be a reportable event, as I understand it, to the DEP if, in fact, there are certain levels of metals found in these soils. And I'm going to look to my expert Noah to correct me when I'm wrong here, but that's my understanding as to what has to take place.
And is it your understanding that Weston, your private outside consultant, would they come up with a remediation plan on the levels issue?
Can I ask you one question first?
Sure.
Are you an attorney, sir?
I am not.
Okay. Weston is not charged at this time with developing a remediation solution. Again, I think it's going to come back to what the results are and how we proceed.
Okay.
Whether or not we even come up with a remediation or we continue as is and just minimize any disturbance or something.
Understood. Just in closing, we stand ready to assist if there's anything that we can do as a potential tenant, partner of yours at some point we hope to be. We stand ready to do so. We have our approvals in place with the city and with HDC, and we'd love to move forward and start paying some lease money as soon as
we appreciate that, but as
the
chairman said too, our concern right now is that we do not take on additional or any liability, that right now is the responsibility of the Army Corps. So
And we don't even know exactly where the tipping point is, where we basically take any cleanup that's required on our dime rather than on the Army Corps'. I will say that obviously, to reflect what your comment was, we are as unhappy about this as you are. Because we've had to hire this, we've hired on this consulting firm at our expense to try to accelerate the process rather than just waiting for the Army Corps to come up and say, well, they'll do it in 2 years instead of 20.
a different time frame than we would like.
Exactly.
Understood.
So we're trying to move it along as fast as we can, and while I understand your impatience, I would appreciate your patience to the extent you feel it's possible to give us that, because
Absolutely.
we're in uncharted waters here as far as we're concerned.
Let me interject one last idea, and I don't know if this is a possibility, if there is a different parcel of land that might not fall under this same umbrella of difficulty that might be available in exchange for the one that has been granted.
I don't know of any that's listed as non-aeronautical.
Okay.
I certainly will take another look. It's, worth a look, but I don't know. We even had to realign yours because of some other environmental issues. So I can only hope that we can get this resolved as quickly as possible, too.
Appreciate your efforts. Any other questions that we can help? We stand ready to assist any way that we might.
Thank you much, Mr. Allred. Appreciate that.
Thank you for your
Mr. Smith,
time.
we appreciate your patience.
Thank you.
Not the answer you wanted, but that's all we can give.
Next, we have a beach license amendment. For Act Surf School, you may require, or may remember, they came in and requested a second parking space for another vehicle to provide sundries and things to beachgoers. Apparently, there's been a change in the ownership or control of the operation, and they are now requesting, they would like to relinquish that second spot, but allow the first one, their previous agreement essentially to be amended to incorporate and include the sale of the sundry items within the one vehicle that they do have. It's, I think it's a good service to the community and creates less congestion with the number of vehicles down there, so I don't have any problem with that if the Commission's okay with it.
I guess we need a motion to rescind that approval for a second vehicle, do we not?
Yeah, I guess it would be to rescind the second vehicle one and then to amend
The existing,
current Act Surf School one.
It's not a license, is it a license, Janine?
It's a beach license.
It's a beach license, all right. Is there a motion to that effect? To release them from the second vehicle commitment and to amend the beach license agreement for the existing vehicle, the first vehicle, to permit them to sell sundries and clothing, but no food from that vehicle.
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously.
Next, we have the ground lease with Emily Air LLC. You may recall this came before the Commission a while ago, and there have been updates and revisions. The attorneys have been back and forth with a number of items. We have the ground lease as well as a termination of the existing lease and a notice of termination of the existing lease, which is the recordable document that would have to be approved. Later on in the agenda, you'll see another sublease item. What we've been told by our attorneys is that these documents would have to be approved, and then the State Division of Aeronautics also has to approve it because of our mortgage with them. So the Commission could approve these, sign them, but we would hold them until we got the approval from the state. And Janine has been in contact with the attorney for the state, and they're working on reviewing this as we speak. So,
Do you want to explain for the benefit of the Commission and the public what this mortgage is that we're talking about?
I wish I could in thorough detail. My reading of it and interpretation is essentially it is consistent with our the grants that we receive from the state, and it's a way for them to amortize, if you will, the amount of money that they have provided to us through grants. Now, my first reading of it indicates that this is supposed to be updated as each grant comes forward, but I think it's a little bit like the grant assurances. They're a little behind the curve on some of this. So we're trying to get a better read from the state on exactly an update of it.
But basically, it's not a mortgage in the traditional sense. It's a security interest. It's a lien against the...
It's a way of tying similar to a federal grant assurance, that if they loan you money, it's good, you have assurances for the duration of that period, for the useful life of the land or whatever it may be. Typically, it's a 20-year thing, and that's what this is. It's a 20-year mortgage, essentially, that ties it to the funding that says you're obligated to abide by all of these requirements, provide insurance, upkeep of the facility, those types of things, for the 20-year period duration of the...
If anybody would like a copy or wants to read it, I'm sure Mr. Rafter would be happy to
Glad to
accommodate.
provide it.
We don't
might
actually
differ
pay
on
on
that
that
one.
one.
No, it's not.
It's a
It's not your
grant
typical
assurance type.
mortgages. Yes.
It's, as I say, it's a security interest. In essence, again, I took a very quick look at it this morning. My reading of it is that it basically, over and above the grant assurances, gives the state a financial security interest in all the airport's assets to avoid revenue diversion and to ensure that the airport keeps going, in essence. It's an oversimplification, but I think it pretty well describes.
So any changes would require their approval. So we may even have to go back on another item here or two and look at whether or not we have to get their approval.
Yeah, it's not clear whether it applies to it was certainly for the terminal. The $15 million they gave us for the terminal. Whether it applies to every 5% share of every AIP grant, for example, is not clear, and that's what we have to figure out. Because if it does, then it's got to be amended several times.
So they are the documents that we
But
have.
it covers the
Sure.
entire airport property, right?
Yes, it's. they
Even the
reference it as
even the non-aeronautical.
Yes, they reference it as Exhibit A, which is a term typically used by FAA for your entire airport property. Same thing.
So any change in any lease or would have to be then approved through,
I don't know if it's any change.
okay.
It may be, in other words, if it's just a change in the lease, but it may be if it is
Well, there's a
Change in
termination
ownership,
here. There's a
termination.
and a
Right.
releasing.
But if you were just to amend a lease or something like that, I don't know that that's in there. But the fact that we're terminating one and replacing with another,
Is part of the deal.
so as I said, we may even need to go back on some of the non-aeronauticals and look at that as well.
Are we supposed to have language in the leases? Is
I
that
didn't see anything in there requiring it.
one? Okay. It's just their approval.
I
It's
think it'd be helpful to try to get some guidelines. from them.
We've sent it to council and also trying to get some direction from them on it too, but I will be talking to Chris about it as well.
Yeah, I think the direction
State.
really needs to initially come from the state rather than from
I will
the.
work on getting that.
All right.
So they are the documents associated with the Emily Air ground lease purchase of the hangar from Ocean Wings.
Is there a motion to? I guess we need to go through this again and approve these documents.
Yes, because they have been significantly modified.
They will be listed in the motion.
I guess, do we have to first terminate?
That's probably the first
Police.
step.
Probably, yeah.
then-
I think that's probably right.
Move forward.
And then notice of termination and then approve the ground lease, I guess would be the order.
But I think that we should do it in conjunction with the assent to the sublease.
Well, that's why that's separate. The order, again, I think would be, as Commissioner Planzer said, terminate, notice to terminate,
And then the release.
grant the land lease, and then approve the sublease.
All right. So we need 3 separate motions, or 4? 3? All right. Is there a motion to approve the termination of the lease?
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Is there a motion to provide notice of the termination of the lease?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And the effective date of the termination is today? Okay. And then there is, the third motion is a motion to assent to the sublease, the airport as the landlord and Emily Air as the tenant. And then the assignment of the sublease by Emily Air to Island Airlines. Is there a motion to approve?
Okay, wait, I'm confused on that one.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I
There should be
think I
2 motions.
garbled it a bit. There is an existing lease, which we have approved, right?
You
Have
just terminated that
We
lease.
just terminated the lease.
Now we have to
Now we need
approve.
to-
No, you just terminated the lease with Ocean Wings.
With Ocean
Ocean
Wings.
Wings.
We have to approve
We approved the Emily Air.
because it's been,
Because it's
has
rewritten.
has
Yes.
been modified.
Correct.
Right.
All right, is there a motion to approve the Emily Air lease as modified?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a
Second.
second? Is there further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. And then we need a motion, so there are four. We need a motion to assent to the sublease under the lease we just approved, the sublease being from Emily Air LLC to Island Airlines LLC.
Correct.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Team Eagle is the next one.
Team Eagle is a contract for snow removal, parts for the snow blower, which unfortunately we will most likely need again tomorrow.
We have the parts?
It's operational. I'll leave it at that. This is the permanent fix. This is required because of the procurement regulations. We have accrued, or we basically have reached a limit with this vendor, and it now requires a contract.
With the limit being $5,000.
$10,000.
$10,000. Okay, sorry, $10,000.
I'll make that motion that we purchase the snow blower, the parts for the snow blower.
We approve a contract, actually, with Team
Okay.
Eagle for
All right.
the purchase of parts in the amount of $1,000. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Finally,
Next is another request for an extension for the World Fuel contract. We had a lengthy conference call with all the various divisions of World Fuel and our staff. We ironed out a number of items. They, excuse me, they have documented and provided us with a lot of the language for the agreement. There's probably going to be, I believe, 3 agreements when we're said and done. One for the purchase of fuel, one for the lease of the trucks, and another for something called Air Elite. But we'll get into that after we get the 2 main ones done. It involves 2 new trucks and also replacing and doing some other work to the existing trucks. So there's a lot of language. It's well underway, and by next meeting, we should have an agreement ready to go with World Fuel.
but in the meantime, we have to cover ourselves.
Yes.
Is there a motion to approve a 1-month extension of the existing contract with World Fuel Services from March 31st to April 30th, 2014?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. All right. I guess we've taken care of Emily Air.
Yes.
Pending matters.
On the town MOU, you may recall I mentioned that the town was working on some procedures, and I received today from Libby a draft that Heidi Bauer and Silvio have been working on for their procedures, as well as some forms and a template. And it's going through the review process of all the directors. We have a meeting on this next week, but this is what we're kind of waiting for so that we can adopt their procedures and put it together with an updated MOU. So it's moving along, but I will say that they did acknowledge and thank Janine because she's doing a tremendous job with all the procurement and kind of mirroring some of the things that we do. So we're getting there with that, but it's a slow process.
So it would be a new template? I mean, a new MOU?
Well-
As opposed to just a template for all the departments?
What I'm proposing, it would be an MOU for us to sign with them, adopting essentially agreed-upon standard procedures. So there'll be procedures that all departments within town will follow, and we'll agree to that. There may be some minor changes with ours where it's just outlining or specifying the communication between the departments. But the existing one was not necessarily an MOU, more than this is what thou shalt do.
This other one was put together at the time of the crisis, shall we say.
Yes.
Clearly by its language.
Or like, this is what thou shalt not do.
And frankly, there's some things in there that the town was supposed to do that they haven't done as well. I think we've pretty well held up our end of the bargain, but the idea is that period of time, we believe, is well behind us, and it's time to have something which reflects how things are actually operating.
And why would we do, though, another MOU as opposed to just following procedures that they've put in place?
Because technically, we don't have to.
Yes.
Okay.
But I think as a matter of good citizenship, it's a good idea.
Because technically, we are not a town department. We're the enterprise fund with the commission, so it's a mechanism type thing where the commission says, yes, we will follow these procedures.
Okay,
And
we
again,
agree
they
to
may be
follow these.
slightly modified from what the other town departments may do.
Okay.
It's
So it
an
might be
update, and it will be a significant improvement over what's in place now, I think, from everybody's perspective.
Right.
Yes.
And the idea is, hopefully to get that other one behind us, and, because as I say, there's some things the town was supposed to do in that they haven't done as well.
Right. Okay.
So,
I mean, I don't think there's anything in there that we were supposed to do that we haven't done, but the as well was not.
we've done some things for the town, too.
Exactly.
Thank you, Gene.
All right, I guess I opened the can of worms here. Proposed grant to the Chamber of Commerce. We do have an opinion from Town Council that under the Massachusetts constitutional provision prohibiting, where is it here? It's called the Anti-Aid Amendment to the Massachusetts Constitution, which generally prohibits the town from giving money to an individual or a nonprofit. He distinguishes in this between giving public money away with no strings and funding a grant agreement which has as its intended purpose providing services to the town and its residents. I mean, to summarize, what Town Council has said is that if we designate the money for a specific purpose that is related to some activity of ours, then it's all right under the state constitution. And that opinion's been circulated to the commission. So then the question comes as to whether it's permitted under the FAA rules. And I will defer to Ms. Planzer and Mr. Rafter as the expert, the resident experts on such matters.
Yeah, this goes back to a policy that was developed, referred to as revenue diversion, or airport revenue policy, actually. And there's a lot of history and sightings of what you can and can't do with airport revenue. And when it comes to community events, it specifically says that, let me see, I'm trying to look for the exact language. Essentially, if it's a community event, it has to be, oh, here it is.
Is it on here? The expenditures to support a sponsor's participation in a community parade would not be, that's the,
No,
directly related to the operation
it
of the
must be
airport?
directly related to the operation of the airport. However, there's a section that, for community events, that I thought could be interpreted possibly, here it is, community purpose use of airport property, such expenditures are directly and substantially related to the operation of the airport. And it gives examples of what is permitted, such as purchasing tickets for an annual community luncheon at which the airport director delivers a speech reviewing the state of the airport, and even contributions to a golf tournament sponsored by Friends of the Airport Committee is permitted. The FAA recognizes that contributions for community or charitable purposes can provide a direct benefit to the airport through enhanced community acceptance, but that a benefit of that nature is intangible and not quantifiable. It goes on to say that it gives an example of what was acceptable, and that was participation in a local school fair with a booth focusing on operation of the airport and carrier and career opportunities in aviation, and the expenditure amount there was $250. But it does specifically say, essentially, and I spoke to Tom Vick, the compliance officer for FAA. I said, if we were to donate to a festival or a parade or something, he said, if it doesn't have a direct relation to the airport, no. I said, what if we were to purchase advertising, an ad? He said, that's considered marketing, and that would be permissible if, in fact, it specifies it's the airport and it's marketing the airport itself.
So if we said something like, AC, whatever, your gateway to Nantucket, would that be acceptable to everybody but Mr. DaCosta?
I think as long, again, as the advertising is also, if everybody's being charged the same for that type of advertising,
Yeah, right.
we're not paying $20,000 for a $1,000 ad or something,
Right.
so.
But we're donating the money, and then they
If-
give you an ad.
If we are purchasing,
We can
An
purchase an ad
advertisement.
for $1,000.
that would be considered marketing the airport, is my understanding after my conversation with Tom.
But I don't want to, I think we should try to figure out a way to do it personally, but I don't want to do something that people are going to be uncomfortable with. So, it's,
I think, given our history, I'm just a little leery right now.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't see that we want to.
Give
away money then.
What kind of an ad would you get for $1,000? Wouldn't it?
it's a full page in
full
their,
page
in
ad,
their
and-
program, however big that is.
and do
I
we
don't
want
know if
that
that's
much?
how we'd want to spend our advertising
Yeah.
dollars, if we're going to allot money for advertising. I think we ought to have some sort of procedure or some
Plan, and that's fair.
plan.
I mean, clearly, the two events that we have supported in the past, and it's a public record that we've supported them, are Daffodil Weekend and Stroll. The Chamber's efforts on those are two big weekends for this airport. They're two very important weekends for this airport. So, and two of the biggest.
Would we be better served to put it in their yearbook, the one that they put out, their annual book, or instead of a special book for the,
Well,
but you're still giving them the dollars.
I
but
think
you're
Commissioner Planzer brings up a very good point. We need to have a defined program.
Right.
Because, again, this, could go back to who's next, where, why aren't you advertising here, there? I don't know.
No.
And is it better to be in one portion or another?
Airport property is a little bit easier to give for the community. I mean, they have a little bit lower standard than just for, airport purposes. It can be for the community benefit.
But even there, we've taken flack over the years for some of the things we did with property for the town.
Well, I'm not suggesting we do it. I'm just
Right,
saying
yeah,
that that's,
no, I mean, it's,
the direct payment of money, I think that's going to get us in trouble. Or potentially could get us in trouble. And they can withhold grant money and hold up
Yeah, the penalties,
PFC.
it specifically says they can withhold a PFC application,
Yeah, it's not worth it.
and we're
I
in the
don't
middle of
believe
that,
it.
so.
I think that it's not worth it, but it's unfortunate, I think. Because I think
But there are probably ways we can. I'm saying we can probably, support the community or probably other ways, but maybe we ought to have a plan.
Okay. Sense of the meeting is we will not do it.
I concur reluctantly, because I know that, the money would be good, used for good purposes, but you have to think about the whole picture.
All right, the master plan.
Master plan, the latest is, last week, the IT guru from Jacobs was out to begin the inventory of our hardware and software systems, and they're preparing that phase of it. There are some documents continuing to be put out onto the website. We had a very good webinar, as I mentioned, at the prior meeting, and received some feedback and comment from some of the participants, and we're addressing their comments and concerns. So things are moving along, but I've been out the past week, so I haven't seen anything other than the IT that's happened last week. So
And do you want to mention, just in very broad terms, the meeting you're having on Friday?
I have a meeting scheduled with Jacobs. They've asked they're doing a client survey on their performance, and I believe it's specifically related to the master plan. I will be open and frank with the individual. I think there's some room for improvement, some concerns that we have. So some of the documentation, the original drafts that I saw had some errors that to me are unacceptable, and it appears that, there were some, I don't want to say cut and paste necessarily, but rehashing of some of the older things rather than starting fresh. So it's a very expensive master plan. I want to make sure that we get what we're paying for. So.
All right, thank you. On to your report.
On to the report. I have some very good news. The FBO is up and operational. They moved in last week when I went on vacation.
Thank you, Janine.
Yes, Janine, thank you.
And crew,
And
I
Lara,
said.
Lara Hanson. The grand opening is planned tentatively for April 18th, and we are going to be inviting folks through there for tours. As a matter of fact, the cabinet will be holding their meeting next Monday. The town directors and Libby will be there next Monday. I'll be giving them a tour also after their meeting. The reels and PAPI for runway 1533, the low bidder for the job was Kobo, and there is a pre-construction meeting tomorrow, I believe it is, or tomorrow or Thursday on that project, so that's moving along. The runway 6 PAPI, or precision approach path indicators, flight check is scheduled for the 27th, this Thursday. The carbon neutral, the ESCO interviews I mentioned before were held. They're continuing to review the results, but as I also mentioned, the investment grade audit amount came in much less than we anticipated, so we think there may be a significant value to proceeding with the IGA. I believe they're looking to try to make a determination probably by mid to late April as to what the selection will be. Volpe is also working on a document that will quantify and qualify all the results of the interview. The passenger facility charge, we forwarded on a response to FAA we received from the consultant. There are a lot of, I don't want to say a lot, there were questions that were asked by FAA that needed quite a bit of research in terms of more detail with regard to the terminal. And one document that we could not find, that I don't think we could find it because it probably doesn't exist, was a TSA approval of the terminal expansion. And I don't believe at that period in time it was required by TSA. I don't think their concurrence was necessarily required at that time, whereas now it is. So we responded accordingly to FAA, and they indicated they will do their best to do a quick turnaround, but they couldn't guarantee anything by town meeting. So. And we're also in the process of preparing grant applications for the security project and the ARF vehicle. So that's moving along. I mentioned earlier the update on the FUDs. We're hoping to get those results back and then make a determination as to how to proceed. On the RFQ, RFP side of the house, the control tower, the RFQs were advertised. No proposals were received after the first advertisement. Janine had a conference call with FAA last week, and it was determined that a design-build approach would not be advantageous for us. There are a number of reasons they cited why that wouldn't be advantageous, and it was determined to reissue the RFQ, allowing additional time for design. It would also push back the construction time frame, which then has a domino effect and kind of pushes us back into probably June for completion of construction. That being said, we are going to have a different opinion as to the potential sites for the mobile control tower. There is a conference call tomorrow, or there's a conference call tomorrow on this subject, but there's a safety management system briefing or meeting early April on the 3 sites for the mobile tower. If it's going to go into June, we're going to be very adamant that the one site that is directly across from the old FBO is probably the best site. The other two would really have challenges and impede our traffic in the May and June timeframe. So we're going to address that with the FAA. The FAA folks were on site this week and met with Johnny and staff yesterday and today to look at how they can get power and all the data cables and feeds to the locations. They came up with some very good and viable alternatives that should work well. So we're moving ahead with that. But again, we've got it. What we did find out, too, was initially we got a read on the expiration of the funding. It gave us the sense that we had plenty of time. Then he came back and said, no, we made another mistake. Sorry, it's now September 15th. September of 15 must be expended. So that's why we have to hurry up and get it moving along again. On the operations side, just an update on, you may have heard some discussion about a shuttle for the fast ferries that the Board of Selectmen are looking into, and they mentioned use of the airport. I explained that if, in fact, the airport parking lot was to be considered, going back to what we discussed with this airport revenue policy and everything else, we would have to charge just like we do everyone else. We can't, be separate and charge unequal things. So I believe they're going to be looking at other alternatives. Also on the operations side, Preston Harriman and staff and Lara put together a CPR training program. We had a number of staff go through it, and it was, I have to say, the training was excellent. Were they from the fire department? The two trainers from the Nantucket Fire Department did a great job. Okay. I took the course. It was excellent. I haven't seen good trainers like that in a long time, so I appreciate all the work. And as we know, it apparently paid off when Preston had to use it, actually. One other note, the snow removal costs just in overtime, and this was as of early March, was over $15,000 roughly. We're going to be preparing a little more detailed cost to see what actual snow removal events are costing us, because this does not include the maintenance. You just approved the Eagle contract. There's equipment, there's parts, fuel, lost revenue. We want to do an analysis of that and just determine what the true impact of the winter storms has been, because, as you know, we're expecting another big one tomorrow, and you'll see in our statistics it's having an impact on us. So I want to quantify that a little better. On the good news side, we have a request from Miami Air, which is a very good charter operator. They're requesting bringing in 1 or 2 Boeing 737s on May 23rd. I'm familiar with their operation. As I say, they're a very good operator, some nice equipment. I believe they have 737-800s. So we're working through the logistics on that. And just a note for your information on air service, if you haven't seen it, JetBlue announced service to Hyannis, between Hyannis and New York, seasonal service. I think that's going to bode well for the Cape. I don't know that it's going to have any negative impact on us, although one of the things I did find out today was if you try to book a flight on JetBlue from Hyannis to New York, prior to the service, they will fly you on Cape Air from Hyannis to Nantucket, Nantucket to New York when the JetBlue service starts. So we may lose a little bit of that, but I don't think that's a big market for us.
Oh, we get a PFC out of it, though.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yes, we will.
Ching.
And one other note, the FAA has requested a visit. Mary Walsh, who's still stationed down in Washington, would like to bring in Mr. Patrick Magnotta up. He's in the Airport Planning and Programming and Planning Environmental Division. Noah will be coordinating that tour, and we'll be showing off the airport on the week of May 19th. And that's my report.
Did you say anything about the carbon neutral?
Yes.
You did. I'm
They're
just-
expecting to
Right.
make a decision by
Thank you.
mid to late April.
Okay, thank you. Any questions?
No?
Mr. Sylvia?
I'll take you through these. They're, again, new format. This is the same as the last one we saw year-to-date last year. Year-to-date through, fiscal year-to-date through February, and I apologize, January, it should say February here, down again significantly, and year-to-date down 7.8%. Again, that's in the operations side, and the storms are having an impact on us, so.
That's
you can see
calendar year, not fiscal year.
That's fiscal year. Fiscal year, July through February. Right?
All right, I got you.
Okay. The emplanements, again, this was a full year last year, and you go to the next one, Dave. Through February, we're over February down 23.5%. Year-to-date, February, we're down 0.11%. So you can see these storms are really having a significant impact. January and February are not boding so well. Okay, and on jet fuel, same thing, down February over February, 43%. We're still chugging along year to date. We're up slightly because we had some very good summer months on the Jet A. So you can see it's almost in half there. And then on avgas, we're down again significantly. Year to date, only 3%. Sooner or later, the sun's got to come out, and hopefully we'll start seeing some of these increase. Noise, good news, no calls in February. No complaints there.
Planes.
Nobody.
No flying?
So, and I will say, I made an error on the last statistical report, and Mr. Bonney from Cape Air noticed it, fortunately, because I was surprised that the numbers reflected what they did, but I transposed Island and Cape Air. He wished that his were that high for that route, but unfortunately they weren't, so we corrected it in this report.
Any questions? All right. There are no subcommittee reports, I guess. Commissioners' comments? A couple of things. I did respond to that email that I got from my wife's friend complaining about the PFC that I mentioned last time. Sorry, I will circulate that. I have not heard back from her, so either she was still mad or satisfied.
And Dan,
I don't know which.
In that same regard, NOAA has developed a very good detailed explanation. I think we want to try to get a Reader's Digest version together, too, to get it out through social media and things, but he cites some very good examples and analogies, so we will work on getting that out to the public because of the overall concern.
I have given each of you, I think you have it there somewhere.
I do, I just put it away, I wasn't sure.
Revision of the Article 12, Town Meeting Article 12, plain English explanation, from what you saw last time. There some slight change of wording in the first paragraph, and then note 4 was added. Otherwise, it is as you saw. A lot of people have been working on the overall plain English explanation of the town meeting article. Hopefully, it'll be useful. As you know, the Board of Selectmen postponed from last week, continued from last week, the hearing and appointment of a new commissioner. The one thing that I'd like to say at this point is that if Mr. Planzer, who is one of the candidates, is appointed, I've been talking to town council, and we will have some special training for the commission on the open meeting law at the next commission meeting. Just as a heads up. And finally, although it was mentioned before, and other people such as Laura Hanson and Johnny Grangrade and his team have had a big part in it, there's been one person who's sort of been the chief cook and bottle washer, mostly bottle washer, I'm afraid, for the GA building from inception till opening. And that's Janine Torres, and I think she deserves our strongest thanks and appreciation for everything she did to make it work and get it open.
Thank you. It looks really nice. The window treatments and all, very good job.
And because of the ridiculous rule about not being able to have a credit card, she undertook to pay for a fair amount of that stuff herself.
And I must say, too, Lara's done the same. She's done shopping things, too, so
Yeah.
both of them put that together. Looks great.
Some banks have a credit card, a debit card that acts as a credit card. And it might be worth exploring whether that is something that would be permissible. I know, but it's a different animal, and the money comes right out of the account. And that may be a problem, but
And why can't we have credit cards?
Well, I think, again, it comes down to
We had one.
procedure and
We had
policing
one.
the
Oh, okay.
procedure.
Yes, we
We had one.
Okay, gotcha. All right.
It's
But
an old
it
rule.
is
Somebody
a
does it
little-
wrong, you take it away.
I mean, certainly when people travel, I think that's one thing, but to ask people to undertake the purchase of general items for the airport
It's not a good practice.
is not a good practice, and so hopefully we can get that at some point squared away. But again, Janine, thank you very much. Is there public comment at this time? I would entertain a motion, therefore, to go into executive session under General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Clause 3, to discuss strategy with respect to threatened litigation with respect to the completion of the GA building. The chair has determined that an open session may have a detrimental effect on the litigation position of the airport. And, Mr. Rafter, with your permission, I would like to ask if she's able to, that Ms. Chris stay for that.
Yeah, I was going to say, if she's available, she has a few minutes.
All right. Is there such a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Is there
I'll
a
second.
Ms.
Aye.
Long, how do you vote? Ms. Planzer, how do you vote? The chair votes aye. Thank you all.